I'm Mr. Johnston, and we're going to talk about endothermic versus exothermic processes. So we can see endothermic and exothermic processes whether we're talking about chemical or physical changes. First, energy is required to break any kind of chemical bond or intermolecular interaction. So if I have two atoms and we want to break apart those two atoms, or we want to break that chemical bond, we have to put energy in. When we put energy in, those two atoms or those intermolecular attraction can break. And just the opposite is true as well. Energy is released when new bonds form. So if I have two atoms and we allow those two atoms to form a new bond, they're going to release energy. And this is also true if we're talking about an intermolecular attraction. If a new intermolecular attraction takes hold, we're going to release energy. And if we think about a chemical reaction, anytime there's a chemical change, we're breaking and forming new chemical bonds. And so there's usually energy changes associated with those chemical reactions. And since physical changes disrupt intermolecular forces and new intermolecular attractions form, there's usually energy changes associated with those physical changes. I think that this diagram is really good for you to include in your notes. And so take a second, pause the video, and draw out those two diagrams. So first, the diagram on the left here, this is an endothermic reaction. So we have the surroundings and the system. Whenever energy is being put into the system, that is an endothermic process. I always remember endo enters. Energy enters the system. And just the opposite, an exothermic process is anytime energy leaves the system. I always remember exo, energy exits. And so, again, these are kind of schematic ways of thinking about the difference between endothermic and exothermic. Another diagram to look at. So anytime that you have an endothermic process, remember energy is entering that system. And so an endothermic reaction, the reaction is actually cooler than the surroundings because energy is going in. Whereas an exothermic reaction, energy is being released. And so in an exothermic process, the reaction is hotter than the surroundings. It's actually releasing energy. Another way we can think about endothermic versus exothermic is these energy change graphs. And so we're going to look at this a little bit more. We can think of the energy of the reactants and the energy of the products. And so if we have to put energy in to get from reactants to products, we know that that is an endothermic process. If we get energy out, if the energy goes down as we move from reactants to products, that is an exothermic. Also point out this bit about activation energy. And so remember we said that we have to put energy in to break bonds. And so this activation energy is really the amount of energy that we have to put in to break those chemical bonds. And sometimes we have to put in a lot of energy to break those chemical bonds, and sometimes we only have to put in a little bit of energy to break those chemical bonds.